Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Doormat Mom No More podcast. I am Doormat Mom. And on this podcast, we talk about estrangement, specifically from the angle of parents. And, obviously, estrangement has blown up over the last few years, last few generations. And it's hit everybody, including Brad Pitt and our own dearly departed, as of today, Hulk Hogan. It just recently came out that he was estranged from his daughter, and she's spoken about it today with regards to their last conversation together. Unfortunately, Hulk Hogan passed away today. So, but as I said, it affects everybody. 1 in 4 families are dealing with it. And there are a lot of perspectives on it. I certainly see the adult child perspective. On my TikTok account, especially, I see a lot of those comments. Many times, some are very helpful and others are pretty vile. And then I certainly see it from, estranged parents' perspectives, and having experienced that myself, I really want to share more about estrangement with my audience. So today I am featuring a guest, not only from he's a YouTuber as well as a TikToker. He talks about a lot of different things, but specifically on YouTube, he talks about blending 2 families into one, and the challenges that families face when they go to do that. And on TikTok, he talks about many things. He talks about politics. He talks about family. He talks about different things that he does in his own business. And but the one thing that got me was a video that he did about estrangement. It was very direct. I'm going to share it. And then I'm going to bring him on. His name is Mike Baker. But here's the TikTok that really got me. And we are going to bring it up on the screen. And then I'm going to start it. Let's go.
No, it's not the parent's job to always fix it. It is always both parties, but both parties have to be able to come together, and a lot of times they're just not. Let me give you an example. My dad was not a great dad, okay? And I had a very dysfunctional family, very dysfunctional. But let me tell you what my dad didn't lose, even though he was violent and an alcoholic. He didn't lose his sons. His sons didn't turn their back on him. We decided that we wanted to pursue a relationship with our dad because we felt family was worth it. Look, my dad told me I was dumb almost every day until I moved out. And for a long time, I struggled with that. If anybody had a reason to alienate a parent, it was this guy. And I did not do that to my kids, which is why I put in place the apologizing as I went as a parent to make sure that my kids never felt the way I did. You're wrong.
So I love that because he's very direct, and he obviously believes in family. Family was worth it. And you don't see that a lot in the comments that we get. I'm sure he's getting, I get, on these TikTok videos where we talk about estrangement. So I'm going to bring him on, and he's going to explain a little bit more about that video and where he comes from, his history and whatnot. So here we go. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Good. So that was a powerful video. That was
that was one of the reply videos.
Yeah, that was. Yeah,
that was one of the,
yeah, that was one of the reply videos. But what I loved about that is you were very you obviously didn't have the quintessential storybook childhood that everybody would love to have, and yet you're saying no, that despite what you went through with your father, and you'll tell us a little bit about that to the degree that you're comfortable, that you didn't abandon him, you didn't estrange from him, neither you or your brother. So share a little bit about what your life is like today, your family, your relationship with your dad, and what drives you to, or drove you to reach that conclusion, and what's different about that and what you're seeing with adult kids today.
Well, okay. So growing up, my dad was kind of a violent alcoholic, and he was known for he was just an angry guy, and the alcohol obviously never helps that. So when I say that he told me almost every day I was dumb, it was always, did he look at me and say, "You're dumb"? No, he'd threaten me with reform school, which a lot of people don't remember what reform school is, but he'd threaten me with summer school. He threatened me with reform school. He'd threaten me with, he would say, "Are you stupid? Are you stupid?" And so, I mean, I remember one time I was probably, there are big blocks in my childhood that are just gone. I don't remember them, but some of the things I do remember is getting stuck right at the door when I came home from school one day because I had a D on my report card, I think it was. And I got yelled at for an hour and a half about how dumb I was. And so I remember that. But yeah, so it was a constant thing. So, going forward, my dad and I didn't actually start getting along until about 2 years before he died. And you can't make up for 20 some odd years in 2 years. Right. And so he got older and he started to soften, and amazingly enough, he was a great grandfather, not great grandfather, but he was very good with the two boys that he did know. Those very same two boys would later come to estrange me. So, but he was very good with my sons, very calm, nothing like when I was growing up. And that was the last couple of years before he died. And so I wouldn't say we were at peace per se. We had a lot of work still to do, but once a person's gone, they're gone. But it never even occurred to me to drop my dad. Never even crossed my mind to just stop, to just never see him again. Because that's not how my generation was raised. My generation was raised that family is family, right. And you may not like them and you may not get along with them, but you give grace and you give forgiveness. Now, I'm not saying that it never happened. I mean, sure, there was always a family member somewhere who had done something so heinous that, yeah, I mean, I could totally see that, but that's just not what we did. So fast forward, my wife and I are a blended family, and we've been married almost 30 years now. It'll be 30 years in September. But so the oldest two boys were from my first marriage. The third oldest boy is from my wife's first marriage, and then our two youngest are from us.
Okay.
The two sons that I have that estranged were from my first marriage.
Okay.
And I had a very toxic ex. Essentially called my wife a lot of names while the boys were growing up, just planting bugs in their ears constantly about how we were too strict and we were this. Was I strict? Yeah, I was strict. Was I? I had a high standard and I wanted the best for the boys. When the boys did something wrong, it was never, "Are you stupid?" It was, I would ask them a very similar question. I would say, "Are you smart?" And they would have to say yes. Okay. Was what you did smart? No. Okay. So does that mean that because you did something that wasn't smart that you're not smart anymore? And they'd be like, "No." And I'd make them say it. "No, it means I'm still smart, but I made a mistake."
Right.
So because I never wanted them to feel less than ever. Right.
Right.
So, but unfortunately with my oldest two, I had that extra person or peoples, maybe right. Even in that case, where there was that little bug in the ear where it was constantly degradation against me, degradation against my wife. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I did everything right in those interactions. Right. I'm not going to. No, I made plenty of mistakes. But the point is I never made a mistake I didn't apologize for, and I never made a mistake so big that it merited walking away.
Right. I found it interesting because there's a big question out there. Did you ever apologize? Did you take accountability? And Like there is an assumption that, estranged parents didn't take accountability. They didn't apologize. They didn't set that stage of apologizing along the way. I know I did. And you say you did, which there's no reason not to believe you. And yet that's still not enough. And so it's a false, false assumption that you just get slapped with. And then the other side of it is when you've gone through a childhood that's hard, and maybe you're raised by a different generation with different rules and whatnot, and different standards. And certainly I was. You almost you actively put safeguards in so you don't mimic the things that your parents might have done that you wanted to improve on. Okay, so you don't want to mimic that, so you're putting those safeguards in place for yourself, which it seems like you did with your estranged boys now, and yet that still didn't work.
Well,
so, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that not every parent is perfect, and not every mistake is trauma.
Right.
So,
and that's become a confusing point today, because it seems like every mistake is abuse or trauma, or toxic, or you're a narcissist, or all those words, those cliche words that we've all heard, when you're really just human. You're a human being doing the best that you can under circumstances that they don't see all that you're going through, right? I mean, you're a successful business owner. You're obviously not a stupid man. You have this whole other platform you do on YouTube with your wife, talking about blended and taking your experience and blended family momentum. And I'll pull it up in a second. It's obvious that you wouldn't be doing all this if you hadn't tried. You were trying, you're trying at life, you're trying at, and keeping a family together. And, it can be rough. And, there is no grace today. I think we gave our parents grace, and there is no grace today, or there's very little grace today.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of sandbagging going on, where it's just blame one side and that's it, and then, and the thing that really gets me is all the circular logic. First it starts out that, well, I tried telling them, but they never listened. Well, I got a sneaking suspicion they didn't know you were trying to tell them because you weren't clear,
Right.
Because with your parents, you got to be, hey, we need to talk about this. This is what bothers me. And if you say it in any other way, they're not tracking it.
Right.
But then there's this whole thing that, well, my parents just won't listen. No, that's not that they won't listen. They're allowed to disagree. It's okay for them to have an opinion that's not yours. But there's so much therapy speak out there now, and there's so much of this breaking generational, breaking generational,
breaking generational,
see, right there.
Was it cycles?
Yeah, so they want to break generational cycles by replacing it with generational division. And so I was talking to somebody just the other day. It's a lot of people don't remember history, but it's a lot like Vietnam, in my opinion. And the fact that when soldiers came back from Vietnam, they got spit on in the airports, right?
Right.
But now when you come back as a soldier, because I was a National Guard soldier for 24 years. Now, when you come back through like the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, there is a gauntlet of people that you have to go through.
Right.
And they clap and they praise you and they make noise. And I think it's a great thing that they do that. But for some soldiers who have had other soldiers in their face and problems for so many months, it can be overwhelming, because so we've gone from one extreme to the other extreme. And so we're doing the same thing here.
Right. No, I agree. That brings up a good point, though, because you do talk about a little bit about politics. I'm going to ask this question. Do you think that there's an underbelly of, whether you want to say an underbelly of political pushing to one side of the aisle per se, whether it be and I agree with you. It shouldn't be Republican, Democrat, right?
No.
It should be, is it a, because I see a strong correlations between, because my mom grew up partially in Germany, and she told me, she went through the whole thing, with World War II and whatnot. And she would tell me stories, and so would my Oma, of what it was like to live in Germany during the Holocaust, and what they were told, and I see a lot of correlations between the dehumanization of, let's just per se, the Jews, being called different, and the dehumanization of parents, being called, let's say, birth givers, and the shift of power from away from the parents specifically towards something, giving the power over to something else. And so that's why I asked the question: do you see a link in some way, or am I making this up?
No, you're not making it up. This was also a discussion I was just having with my wife the other day. So on Blended Family Momentum, our YouTube page, we cover a lot of things about blended families. This parental estrangement is actually super prevalent amongst blended families because you've got the whole step and everything. So with that, just so that listeners know, ours is obviously Christian based. So if you go back historically, and this is where I think the politics kind of play in. When you go back historically, you've got way back in the day when, little Johnny and his mom and dad were on the farm or the ranch together, and they were working the land and they were doing the things, right? And then you get to the industrial age, and now dad's gone. And dad's not just gone a little, dad's gone like 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. And then you move forward and you've got the whole nuclear family situation where mom's still home and dad is working and the kids have access to a parent. And I would say right around the boomers is when that started to change, because I think Gen X, which would be my generation, Gen X was then known as the latchkey kids. Why? Because neither mom nor dad were home. And I think we were the first generation to have mom primarily removed from the home. So now you see that progression. So you get into the millennials. Now they're the second generation to have both parents working and gone and not necessarily around. But now you begin to see a separation because the parents, Gen X, overdoes it with millennials. Right. And you start to see a resentment because now these kids have worth issues because we did too much for them. Right. And so now they're not sure that they can do things. And then you got Gen Z who is like, what is going on? We don't even know what's going on. But so we've peeled mom out of the home, or we peeled dad out of the home. Then we peeled mom out of the home. Then we put separation between mom, dad, and the kids. And now that was just during the teenage years there. Now we have a complete separating happening between the adult kids and the parents or the grandparents. What will the next generation look like? How much more of a division? And my honest opinion, both politically and spiritually for that matter, is when we remove God back here from schools and from life in general, that peeling of the onion then became super simple. And so now you've got, adult kid against adult parent. Parent doesn't agree. Adult kid just says you're deflecting or you're whatever. The next generation is going to have no grandparent. They're going to be like, who? So it's a complete and utter breakdown of the family ultimately. And it's unfortunate.
We share that opinion all the way through. I agree with you. I often reflected on, because I come from a Jewish Christian background, I often reflected on what happened. When did it break down? When did it start? And when it's almost as if, when you remove God, you removed God, yes, but you also, in that whole period of time, you basically started just removing the entire foundation. So now the house is built on no foundation. There's no foundation that keeps the family together. It's all about, and this goes back to estrangement, what makes me feel good. But and these that's what kids say, if it doesn't make me feel good, if it doesn't fit into my narrative, it doesn't, then it's obviously not good for me. And that's what they're being taught, right? But in a society, in my opinion, in a society, societies don't stick together through feelings. Societies stick together through the building blocks that keep it together, which may have nothing to do with feelings. And part of that is, it's God, it's obligation, it's loyalty, it's family, leaning on family. It's, the center of the home are the two parents. That, it's all of that. And we just started, doing, and then shipping them out to school, which was telling them all these different things. All right. And helping to chip away at the family. And, but how do you walk this back now? Because we're, in a sense, so far down the road. Can we walk it back where we can, because I think if this goes in the way it continues to go, we won't, like, I agree with you, we're not going to have the family structure anymore. And and that's really, and they think these adult kids that are screaming, I'm estranged, look at me, I'm estranged. Well, look at you, because you think that what you've done is, you've charged and you moved society ahead, and you've moved, and you're doing what's good for your children per se. But what you're doing with your children, what they're seeing, they're ultimately going to take that and step it further down the road. So whatever you're thinking is history will clarify that for you. And so I really think that we have to somehow pull this back, but I'm not sure we can at this point. I'm not sure we can. What are your thoughts?
Well, so whether a person believes in God or not is really irrelevant, because the whole point here is, if you ask a person where their moral and ethical foundation came from, they'll more than likely tell you, well, my mom and dad taught me, or my grandpa taught me, or whatever. 9 times out of 10, those ethics and morals were biblically based at some point. And so they moved forward. Okay. So what's happened here is removing God removes the moral and ethical foundation and replaces it with moral and ethical objectivism, which means that then nobody is right and nobody is wrong, which is, even people who believe that know that there's got to be a limit. And mankind has not proven that he can set his own positive limits in those areas. Okay. So like it or not, morals and ethics come from God. It doesn't, whether you want to admit it or not, they come from Scripture. So do I think it can be walked back? I do. And I think I've noticed a growing trend amongst some Gen Zs, quite honestly, where they're starting to walk back to that, where I don't remember the gal's name. There's a gal on TikTok who's 19 who gets a ton of abuse because she chose to be a stay-at-home wife. And now she's talking about biblical standards and biblical, everything for being a stay-at-home wife. And she's getting a lot of flack because she doesn't have kids yet and she doesn't know. And granted, I'll give those people that. Yeah, she's not old enough to know what it's like to try and balance marriage and kids and, and time with a husband and time. That's true. But biblically, she's not off base because she's trying to build her moral and ethical foundation there. But I notice there's a lot of young ladies her age and some young men that are moving that direction, because if you look, what you're seeing now you're seeing men who have sworn off dating because you see nothing but a constant barrage of young ladies who are like, I don't understand why men won't talk to me. Well, feminism, that's why men won't talk to you. And then you've got a whole contingent of women that are doing nothing. I've heard everything from, I think men should get put in prison when they're 18 and have to earn their way out. I think men should be required to be homeless for a year. And I'm like, are you kidding me? But the thing, what needs to happen? Can I give an example here?
Yeah.
I want to chew up time here. So So when I was in Iraq, I would say the single biggest problem with their system was the sheikh system, the sheikh. They're called sheikhs over there, but
Mm-hmm.
it was the sheikh
Mm-hmm.
system because the sheikhs were the village leaders basically, and they would give false information to keep power. Okay, and it was
Right.
pretty obvious that if you could not, when I say eliminate, I don't mean, I don't mean what people might think. I just mean eliminate the office
Right.
and let it travel up like it should.
Right.
Then I think things would have been better. But the problem here is therapy. Let's be honest. So you've got therapy speak going through the roof. You've got a ton of therapists that are now having all of these kids who want to estrange from their parents living in the past. And any kid, it's been proven, anybody who focuses on the past will always remember it more negatively than a person who focuses on the good things.
Right.
That's a fact. I don't have
Yeah.
to be a therapist for that to be a fact. So you've
Right.
got this whole thing of therapy speak going on, and it's my truth and it's this. I got news for everybody listening. Okay. It is okay for somebody to be right and somebody to be wrong. This whole agree to disagree thing, that's a cop out. It is okay to be wrong and it is okay to be right. And we need to get away from this. Everybody needs to be so the same that nobody's unique anymore. So
I so agree with you, and I've said that before. I've never heard someone say that with me, but yeah, it is. It's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to be right. Yeah. and you know what? There's another. You don't have to meet in the. You don't have to meet in the middle, and you don't have to agree to disagree. You know, there is a right and there is a wrong. And and let me just say the trend that you were talking about as far as women, you know, going and getting back to more traditional roles. It's called trad wife, and I did a whole series when I was writing for the Western Journal on that. And and yeah, it's a really interesting trend. I think it's a health. I mean, people they hate on me anyway. I think it's a great trend because I think it's something that if you know, if she is happy and he is happy and their home is operational, and I mean, that's wonderful. That's great. I mean, a lot of homes aren't operational, and you know, and she's not pulling, you know, women back. She's moving them into the future in her own way, you know, that she's choosing to be home for her kids. I think one of the worst things that you can do as a mother, I'm sorry. And I was, you know, I was a stay-at-home mom. I lost my husband very early. I was 35. So I had 4 little kids to raise. So I had to be everything. And so I'm in a different situation. And I still was there, like, as much as possible, every which way. But because I went through that, and because I saw both sides, I had to make sure that the family was fed, clothed, money, taken care of, there for, you know, every play, every this and that. I never stopped. But because of that, I saw I can speak to both sides, although I'm not a man, but I can speak to it. I think the worst thing in the world is when there is an A parent in the home. I think the worst thing in the world is an A parent is not in the home, especially when the kids are young. And then you look at the teenagers and you say, do I really, you know, do I really think that I really want to be out of the home now? Because then, you know, a whole other new phase happens. So I do think that that's a big part of the problem. And so I admire her that she's moving, you know, women, you know, she's making it okay for women to say, I don't want to be out of the home. I want to be home. I think that's great. So let's talk about blended family momentum. I'm going to bring this up. Hold on for a second. I'm going to bring where is my little arrow? Arrow. Yeah, that escape you, right? Okay. So there's blended family momentum. So there's a book, and then there's the series that you do with your wife, and that's your wife is Brenda. Brenda?
Yeah.
Is okay. So
Brenda.
Tell us about Brenda. Tell us about your marriage. Tell us why you went this route, wrote the book. Fill us in.
So obviously I was married before, she was married before. And when we met, like I said, in September 11th is our anniversary. So, but
Oh,
because
okay.
it'll be easy to remember. So,
You never forget. I was going to say, you never forget.
so we, when we met, we hit it off right away, quite honestly. She asked me out just for the record. So,
Okay, you got that straight, Brenda. Where are you?
just for the record. But when she watches this later, she'll roll her eyes, but I just want to be clear. So anyway, so we had a serious talk. Now, it only took us, quite honestly, from when we started dating to when we got married, it was 8 months.
Wow.
And we were pretty sure we knew what we wanted. And the interesting thing there was the fact that we had an in-depth discussion about marriage and what we wanted in marriage. And we made the agreement in the very beginning that divorce was never an option. That if we were going to do this, we would work it through, and that was just that. No matter how mad, no matter how happy, no matter how mad, no matter how indifferent, that we would always choose each other.
Okay.
So originally, Brenda did not want to stay home with kids. She was working as a nursing assistant. And I said that was fine. However, I knew I'd gotten to know her pretty well, and I knew her well enough to know that she would eventually indeed want to. So at one point, shortly after we got married, she had a really bad day. She got really attached to her residence there. She had a really bad day, and she called me crying and said that she just felt bad because she had lost this patient, and she felt like, and for whatever reason, she felt like she should be home with the boys. And I told her right then, quit, go give her 2 weeks right now. And she was like, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to figure it out. And so she did. She went in and she gave her 2 weeks. And I'm not going to sit here and say it was easy. It was not, because shortly after that, we got taken to court by her ex-in-laws, separately by her ex-husband, separately by my ex-wife. So we had 3 different court cases going at the same time. And that was tough. And I was the sole income. And I would work 2 and 3 jobs and whatever else I had to do to make that happen. And so for most of our marriage, I have worked at least 2 jobs. Right now, I don't have 2 jobs, but that's recent. I was teaching, so I did have 2 jobs. But I don't have any regrets. She was able to stay home. We made the sacrifices we needed to make. And part of but we actively worked on the marriage too. We did couch time. We did date nights. We did, knowing that eventually the boys, because we started instant family. We didn't get time together before kids. We started 3 kids, boom, and then had 2 more.
Right.
And we knew eventually it was going to be just the 2 of us, and we wanted to be proactive in that.
Right.
So we did all the things. And what happened was we started getting questions from a lot of other married couples because we were best friends. That was our goal, right? And today, by the way, 30 years later, we're still best friends. So we would get the question, what are you guys doing? We thought we were doing what you should do. And therefore, everybody was doing that. Isn't everybody looking for the right answer? Isn't everybody trying to get along? Isn't everybody looking to make this work better? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Right. So we actually started counseling other couples on some of the things. I was very careful because I think, and you probably agree with me, I think that qualifications matter. If I have a 17-year-old son I'm having problems with, I'm not going to go ask my buddy who has a 5-year-old son.
Right.
Because he's not qualified. Okay.
Right.
I'm not going to go ask a guy who has no kids for marriage advice. Right. Because he's not qualified.
Right. You mentioned that in a video of yours, by the way. I saw that. I thought that was great.
Yeah. Qualifications matter. So as we went up, we started finding some courses to take. And so not only did we take the course for ourselves, we started teaching it. So the courses we would get, we would teach to other couples. And so we've worked with several hundred couples over the years. And finally, this is the funny part. About 5 years ago, we started Blended Family Momentum. It was originally called Mom's Mixed Family Blender. And we started it about 5 years ago, really tried to push it, and we got about 200 subscribers, and then it just kind of fell flat.
Right.
And we stopped.
Right.
We stopped. We were like, okay, it's not going anywhere. And then over the next couple of years, we watched it grow with no new content to over 1,000 subscribers.
Oh, wow.
And so we
Wow.
kept watching it and we're like, why is this growing? We're not doing anything with the channel. So then we
Right.
finally made the decision that was kind of God's calling to us to step back into it. So we stepped back into it, wrote the book.
Right.
Shortly, we actually have a course we built based on the book
Oh,
that
wow.
that we're going to release here pretty soon. And the whole idea is to move into a space where not only can people get the free content on YouTube, they can get the
Right.
book, they can get the course, and then eventually we'll move towards live events, because blended families are not getting any smaller. That group is not getting smaller. And their problems, the things that they forget is that blended families are still families and family rules apply. You don't get to, sure, you've got some extra baggage and you've got to make allowances for certain things, but the
Right.
same rules still apply. There's still a mom in the house. There's still a dad in the house, whether it's the bio mom or the bio dad, it doesn't matter. Those are offices. They're
Right.
not, they don't give you special privilege. They just mean, hey, in this house,
Right.
I'm the dad, period.
Right.
You know, you don't
Right.
have to call me that, but I'm the dad. And so
Right.
it's about how to build a family out of what a lot of people think is too broken to be a family, but it isn't. Absolutely not. We still have a great relationship with 3 of our boys, and we see them often and talk to them often, and we have almost 11 grandkids now. So
Wow, that's a lot. Well, the first thing I love about this is the first part of your story, because what you did is you laid the groundwork for not growing apart. And I hear that over and over with divorce. We grew apart. We grew up. What does that mean? I mean, you grew apart.
that means it wouldn't do the work. Yeah.
What happened there?
Yeah.
Because I know when my late husband was sick, we still, as long as we could, we still dated each other. I mean,
Yes.
we did the work. Because I didn't want him to feel like he was any less of a partner, less of a person, less of a husband to me. We still dated, and
Yes.
to the point that we could. So that whole conversation, what you just said, is meant you circumvented growing apart, and then you enveloped the family with your philosophy, and you're right. The blended families are not they're not going away. They're just growing because I mean, the divorce rate is so high and people are trying it again, for better, for worse. In many cases, it's without the right tools, it can be worse. And without that, mentor, like having a mentor, you're being a mentor to these blended families. And so I think that content, it makes sense to me why that content's continue to grow. And I think it's great. And I'm gonna at the all the little writing things that I have to do after this, I'm gonna make sure that your link tree is in there so that people can find you on every level, and then certainly benefit from your wisdom. And you're right, there's way too many people giving advice, whether it be on YouTube or any of the social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, that are not qualified. You're seeing, as you put in one of the videos, you're seeing young fathers with 3-year-olds and young mothers with 5-year-olds saying, oh, but I would never have done that to my 15, 16. Well, how do you know? You don't know. How do you know? Like, how do you know? That's like a crazy statement. Like, you're a crazy person for thinking that. You don't know what's going to happen when your kid is 15, 16, 17, 20, 20. And then we have which kills me. It used to be you had a baby, you had a toddler, you had a youth, and then you had a teenager, and then you had a young adult, and then there was an adult, right? Now they start adding categories. So you have a tween, and somewhere along the way we have an emergent adult, which is no longer an adult. It's a what is that? A pre-adult? I mean, like, it's an emergent. So anyone up to 30 has now become an emergent adult, which only means that you can live in your parents' basement longer if you choose to.
I think that's exactly what it means. Yes. It's like in marriage, going back to what you said about marriage, everybody standing at the altar is all, googly eyed and everything. And they're all, oh yeah, forever. And they say for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. The problem is they don't know what that looks like. And so when that comes, vows are forgotten. They're like, what? I didn't say that. I'm here for my happiness. And it's like, you know, I don't get it. You know, it's either vows are legally are even scripturally are a legally binding. The word itself is legally bound. And so it's not a light word to use.
No, it's not. But people take it as light. You know, it's like now it's all about the trial marriage and then the real marriage. I don't know. A trial marriage? Are there really such things? I mean, is there a trial divorce? Can I have the trial?
That's just when people live together. Exactly.
Anymore. We are an insane society at this point. Like in every which way.
My favorite one so far as the estrangement goes, something you said just reminded me of that is the whole, your kids didn't choose to be born. And it's like, you're like, wait a minute, let me get this straight here. For one, on one hand, they'll complain that the grandparents never help with the kids, right? The kids that, if I go by their logic, didn't choose to be born. But apparently when they didn't choose to be born and the daughter or the son chose to have kids, now you as a grandparent are somehow obligated, you know, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. But then the whole, they didn't choose to be born. It's like, well, let's see. So then you say, excuse me, then you say, all right, so, but I clothed you and I fed you and I made sure you were at your games. And they're like, that was the bare minimum. That was what was expected of you. Don't expect a pat on the back because you did the bare minimum. I'm like, whoa, let's see. I'm pretty sure I could go to jail if I didn't feed my kid. Pretty sure I could go to jail if I didn't house my kid. Pretty sure I could go to jail if I didn't give my kid adequate medical care. Pretty sure I could go to jail if I didn't educate my kid. There's not a law in the books that I'm aware of that says I'm going to go to jail if I hurt my kid's feelings. If I tell my kid no. There's no law that says if I don't take my kid to a sports game or whatever practice they're supposed to be at, I'm going to jail. So in truth, your minimum obligation is housing and feed. It's not all of those other things that we did out of love that we did not have to do.
But that's the thing, okay? So, Mike, let me just tell you what you just described, okay? I'm going to tell you. It's transactional. That was transactional. That wasn't love. You can't equate the two. It's got to unconditional. I don't know what the definition means anymore to them. And then that's all transactional. It took nothing, by the way, for you to do that. So just be aware. And it meant nothing to them that you did do that because it doesn't qualify as love, right? And when you talk about they didn't ask to be born, do you know there was a gentleman in India who sued his parents for that very reason?
I did.
Yeah. Is that crazy? I mean, he lost, thank God. But I mean, that is to the level the day that the person wins or that, it's over.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
we all walk away.
McDonald's for hot coffee. It can happen.
The humanity will cease to exist because no one will be having children anymore.
I don't know. Maybe they need to stop at that point.
Oh my Lord. Anyway, this has been fun. You're very interesting, gentlemen. We should do more. We should have another session because we could go on and on.
Absolutely. I got lots to say.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring Brenda on too.
Oh yeah, no, that would be. You want to get somebody wound up, get her wound up. Yeah.
I think I'd like her. And then even like I said, I'm going to put your link tree in all of the write-up that I do on this. And thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing that video. Thank you for being an advocate for parents. Speaking common sense where there's very little of today. You're a breath of fresh air, and you're a really nice person. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I love being on.
All right. Well, then you're going to come back. All righty. I'll see you later.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And there you have it. So that was a fun episode. I have a lot of fun episodes. I have a lot of great guests. And I look forward to sharing more of them with you. And now before we close, I'm going to do the old book promotion. We always do that, right? Everyone else does. I'm going to bring my book, Doormat Mom No More. It's on Amazon. Please pick it up. We're fighting troll reviews. In Europe, it's like 4.7 stars. In the US, it's like 2.7 stars because of the TikTok trolls. So grab a copy and read it through. You will. It has a tremendous amount of great information. And then leave a review. If it's a bad review, don't leave a review. That's what I'm going to say. All right, that's it. We'll see you next time on Doormat Mom No More. And thank you for joining us. And stay safe until we meet again.